The United Kingdom is one of the most prominent countries in Europe when it comes to theme parks. In fact, in terms of the number of parks worth visiting, it's probably second on the whole continent. But even more plentiful than the number of attractions in the UK is the number of people there who enjoy riding those attractions. Even as an outside observer, something I can clearly tell is that people in the UK love theme parks and roller coasters. This is apparent to me for many reasons: the huge crowds at UK parks I've visited, the frequency I've heard Brits talk about theme parks, even in places nowhere near one, and the large number of British coaster enthusiasts in the global coaster community. There was one major problem with the British theme park landscape, though. The UK did not have a truly elite roller coaster. Before 2024, there were a lot of really good coasters in the UK. Stealth, Nemesis, Icon, and to some people Smiler, but there was nothing universally agreed upon as world-class. So when the Brits found out that Thorpe Park was building a massive new roller coaster, a mock hyper similar to others that were regarded as arguably some of the best coasters in the world, they lost their minds. For the next year or two, I could not escape the unfathomable amount of Hyperia content churned out by the British coaster community during construction, testing, and opening. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. And sure, the ride looked great, but the community as a whole hyped it up beyond proportion, to the extent that I wouldn't be surprised if there were a new religion formed worshipping it. But how good is Hyperia? Well, this past summer I rode it, and in my opinion it is a good roller coaster made really good because of its scale. Here's what I mean. Hyperia is the tallest and fastest roller coaster in the UK, as well as the 5th tallest and fastest in all of Europe. The experience is boosted positively because it's so big and fast, since, as it turns out, being high up is fun and going really fast is fun. But aside from that, Hyperia is objectively not great. To really understand why, let's get into the overall experience. When Hyperia was announced, Thorpe wasn't only hyping up the ride itself, but the theme and all the parts around it. The theming was something I looked forward to as well. It appeared reminiscent of the theming for Ride to Happiness, which I believe to be one of the best themed coasters in the world, both with a majestic soundtrack and a seemingly ethereal atmosphere. Fast forward a year, and Hyperia's surroundings were nowhere near what they could have been. Instead of a spellbinding, magical, and otherworldly ambiance, we got mulch. Other than the soundtrack, which is pretty good, nothing about Hyperia's theming came remotely close to impressing me, especially not the stupid slogan printed on the side of an unthemed station building. But I can excuse poor theming as long as the coaster itself is good. To begin Hyperia's layout, you take a right-hand outer bank turn out of the station similar to Untamed. It's a fun way to start out the ride, and after that you scale the lift hill and plunge down the twisted drop. This is by no means the best drop in the world, like I've heard some people say, but it is still incredible. If you're in the back, you get ejected out of your seat while subsequently being thrown to the side. It feels a lot like a twisted drop, just with a little more whip. Then you hit the first valley and are greeted with a pretty serious rattle. Now, I don't know why Hyperia has a rattle, it is a brand new ride, but both this and Voltron do, noticeable enough to detract from the experience, so maybe it's just a mock thing that needs to be fixed. It's not horrible though, and only really shows up in the valleys. The first element after the drop is this non-inverting Immelman that provides good airtime coming out of it in the back few rows. I definitely prefer the back to the front on Hyperia, even though I couldn't choose and the furthest forward I got was row 4, but it seems like the back would be best because of the drop and this element. The Immelman doesn't pull as much force as it could, but it's still really fun because of the scale and the airtime coming out of it. After another rattly valley, you rise up into what a lot of people say is the best element on the ride, this outer banked airtime hill that twists into a downwards barrel roll halfway through. This is a fantastic element, but it's a lot better in theory than it actually rides. The outer banked portion seems less about the airtime and more about stalling you outwards, which results in the falling roll not having as much whip as it would if the banking weren't as extreme. If the hill were banked a little less and was smaller, I think it'd be even better since there'd be more airtime, laterals, and whip. The way it is now though, still awesome and the most consistently great part of the ride. In the back row the drop is better, but this element is great in all rows. There's another rattly valley after the outer banked roll before you traverse an enormous stalled dive loop. This element provides about 2 seconds of good hang time and then brings you back down the way you came. It's a really solid element since hanging upside down is fun, but there definitely could have been more whip coming into the stall portion. It's pretty gradual. After these first few huge elements is when most coasters would start to get into the middle of their layout, maybe incorporating a few helixes, airtime hills, and zero-G rolls. But not Hyperia. After the stalled dive loop you hit a fake splashdown with a trim, then a tiny outer banked hill with some pretty good airtime, and finally you turn into the brakes. In case you couldn't already tell, Hyperia is very short in terms of duration and, more importantly, elements. The ride literally has 5 distinct maneuvers: the drop, Immelman, outer bank troll, stalled dive loop, and final outer bank. That is not a lot. In a presentation for Mock Rides, one of Hyperia's designers said that they originally wanted to get rid of the trims on the splashdown and add more elements to give the ride a true second half, but it didn't fit into Thorpe Park's rather low budget. So, because the chain didn't want to pay a little extra, an unnecessarily short ride became part of what Hyperia is.
Well done, Merlin.
Sorry to burst your bubble there, Merlin, but 5 elements is not enough for the country's flagship coaster. 35 seconds is not enough for the country's flagship coaster. As much as I can't stand British people at times, they deserve better. The reason I'm a little angry now is that Hyperia could have easily been elite. It just would have taken a little more money from Thorpe to give to Mock in exchange for a better overall ride. But my opinion isn't the only one, and for every one of me, there seems to be 10 others continuously clamoring about how good Hyperia is. I put out a poll a few days ago that supports that. Over 5 times as many people said it was amazing than anything else. So if you adore Hyperia like so many seem to, by all means adore it. But I don't. It's a fun coaster, of course, and by no means bad, but the elements don't pack as much of a punch as I would have hoped. The rattle is very discouraging for a new ride, and to top it all off, it's not complete in terms of layout or theming. Hyperia feels half-baked, magnificent in concept, but falling short in execution. And in spite of popular opinion, I know I'm not the only one who feels this way. A few of my British enthusiast friends were borderline obsessed with this ride like so much of the country, and after riding it, they too came off disappointed. It goes to show that hype can have a substantial impact on how anything is perceived. The hype generated by Hyperia, because of its impact on the British coaster community and the promotions Thorpe did for it, was too big for what the ride turned out to be, at least the way I see it. It's a monumental coaster for the UK, but ultimately fell short of what could and should have been. Thank you for watching to the end of this video, and since you're here, stick around a little longer for 2 quick things. First, if you have ridden Hyperia, leave a comment with your thoughts on it. I really want to know if there's even more people that echo my sentiments, or if I'm pretty much alone on this. Second, I have some enormous videos in the pipeline to end out 2024, easily some of my most ambitious projects, and things I bet you'd be interested in, so go ahead and subscribe to make sure you don't miss them when they come out. That's all I have for now. Have a great day. Goodbye.